Listen carefully. Right now, as oil prices surge past $110 a barrel, as every screen on television points toward tankers, pipelines, and the Strait of Hormuz, you are being directed to look at the wrong thing. Because the real risk doesn't begin in the Middle East. It begins 12,000 miles away, on an island carrying $1.2 trillion of US debt on its shoulders. And right now, that nation is moving toward the edge. No noise. No warning. Just pressure quietly building. And if you think this is just a story about oil, then you're missing the most important part. Because what happens next won't just reshape the energy market. It will reach directly into your money. What you're about to hear isn't just another update. It's a shift in perspective. So stay with us because the next few minutes may change the way you see everything. Welcome. And if this is your first time here, you didn't arrive early and you didn't arrive late. You arrived exactly when it matters. Because this is not a channel that chases headlines. This is where we slow them down and uncover what they're trying to hide. The financial stories that get rushed past. The economic pressures that take years to build and only seconds to break. That's the purpose of this channel. It's built for those who spent a lifetime creating something real and refuse to watch it quietly disappear. And before we go further, we ask something simple, but we ask it with respect. If you remember a time when interest rates lived in double digits, when the dollar actually held its weight, when retirement was a plan, not a fear, then this channel was built for you. So subscribe. Not for us, but for the version of you that saw the system clearly before it started to change. Treat this like an appointment you cannot cancel. You wouldn't miss a meeting with your accountant, so don't miss this. Hit subscribe. Turn on the bell so the next time the system starts to shake, you know before it happens, not after the damage is done. And tell us, where are you watching from? London, Lahore, Lagos, Los Angeles, or anywhere else? Because this story doesn't belong to one country. It's global. Now let's begin. On the morning oil crossed $110 a barrel, the world did what it always does. It looked at the price. Read the headlines. Listened to experts debate. Then went back to life, believing someone somewhere was in control. But no one is in control. Because the crisis you're seeing is not the real crisis. The price of oil is real. The panic is real, but the story behind those numbers is incomplete. And in history, incomplete stories are always expensive. The world is watching the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of global oil supply passes each day. The ships are still moving, the system is still operating, but the most important piece isn't on that map. As tensions rise in the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices go up. That's nothing new. The world has understood that pattern for decades. So the cameras turn to oil tankers. Experts start forecasting $15 per gallon gasoline. Everyone asks the same question. What happens to oil? But that's the wrong question. While the world focuses on energy, another vulnerability is opening up. Not economic, not financial, but survival. Water. Across the Gulf, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman, people don't live off river water. They rely on desalinated seawater. Qatar depends on it for 99%. Most of the others are above 70%. Even the UAE sits around 42%. This is not a minor detail. This is the foundation of life. And to disrupt it, you don't need to close the strait. You don't need to sink ships. You just need to cut the power. You just need to disrupt the water supply system. A few days, not weeks, and the crisis is no longer about oil. It becomes about water. And while the world is still watching oil prices, they won't see it coming. This is where most analysis stops. But the story doesn't end there. They debate oil, then walk away feeling like they understand the problem. But another group, those not watching what the Gulf is burning but what it holds and borrows, have already shifted to a different map. Not the Middle East, but Japan. Because in strategy, the most dangerous weapon isn't the one aimed at you. It's the one aimed at what keeps you alive. History has proven that. You don't need to destroy cities, just cut the water and wait. Humans can survive for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. That strategy never disappeared. It was simply modernized. And in the Gulf, where GCC nations control trillions of dollars, build cities out of desert, and operate the world's financial and energy hubs, There exists a vulnerability that money cannot hide. They cannot produce water on their own. No power, no infrastructure, no desalination, no life. Qatar depends on it for 99%. Bahrain and Kuwait are above 70%. This is not economic risk, this is existential risk. And while the world is still watching oil, the real system is somewhere else. Saudi Arabia, despite its size, still depends on desalination for over 70% of its water. The UAE, often seen as the most diversified economy in the region, still relies on it for around 42%. These are not countries with weak infrastructure. These are modern systems built almost entirely on a single process, desalination. And that process runs on electricity. That's where the strategic equation changes. No need to strike refineries. No need to close the strait. Just target the power grid. Just disrupt the energy flow that sustains the water system. The technology already exists. Drones can reach infrastructure. Pipelines can be damaged. Power can be cut. And when that happens, you don't see oil prices move first. You see water disappear. No need to destroy the plant. Just turn it off. A few days, not weeks, is enough for civilian life in some of the richest nations in the world to begin breaking down. Not because they lack money. Not because they lack oil, but because they lack the most basic element to survive. And while all eyes remain fixed on Hormuz, the real scenario is unfolding on a much deeper layer. This is the detail that turns this scenario from theory into a flashpoint. The Gulf nations know it, governments know it, militaries know it, and more importantly, those who control the flow of capital know it. When a wealthy nation feels its survival is at risk, it doesn't wait, it moves capital. It restructures risk, quietly, without warning. And when sovereign wealth funds begin to reposition, the shock doesn't stay in the Middle East. It moves through bond markets, through currencies, through the global financial system, until it reaches the most sensitive point, Japan. Not because Japan is weak, but because Japan is too disciplined. An economy built on precision, extreme savings, and decade-long planning. Its central bank operates like a tightrope walker, exact, balanced, but fragile. And that's the problem. Because there's a kind of danger that doesn't arrive with an explosion. It comes like a crack in a dam, silent, invisible until it's too late. Japan is that crack, not because of failure, but because of math. Because no matter how disciplined a nation is, it cannot escape the limits of its own structure. Japan, an island nation of 327,000 square kilometers, beautiful, disciplined, but with almost no natural energy resources. No oil, not enough gas, no buffer. Everything runs on imports, factories, power, transportation, supply chains. For decades they managed it. They became extremely efficient, built surpluses, accumulated foreign reserves. And most importantly, they hold around $1.2 trillion in U.S. treasuries, a lifeline and an anchor. But the story isn't in the number. It's in what happens when the system is stretched. When oil moves above $110, the rest of the world sees higher prices. Japan sees something else. Dollar-denominated obligations while its own currency weakens. And this is the mechanism. When tension rises, capital doesn't think, it moves. It runs to one place, the US dollar. The dollar index surges 3% in a single session. And when that happens, Japan's energy cost doesn't just rise. The pressure doubles, not just because of oil prices, but because they have to buy it with a currency that is losing value. And that's when the math starts to speak. 3% may sound small. In currency markets, it's an earthquake. When the dollar rises, the rest of the world falls, but nowhere feels it more than Japan. The yen doesn't weaken gradually, it drops within hours. And that's when the equation changes. The world sees oil at $112, but Japan doesn't buy oil at that number. They buy in yen converted into dollars. When the yen collapses, $112 becomes $130, even $140. Not because oil moved higher, but because their currency moved lower. The pressure is no longer the commodity price. It's the exchange rate. The world's third largest economy begins to feel real structural stress. And at that point, the choice is narrow. Raise rates? That could break the domestic bond market. Use reserves? Not for long. Or sell what they hold, $1.2 trillion in U.S. Treasuries. They don't need to sell everything. They just need to start. And when Japan sells, the United States doesn't stand outside it. Because treasuries are not just debt. They are the foundation of the entire financial system. Everything still looks normal. Markets are open. Banks are operating. But underneath, the structure has already begun to shift. And when that happens, the chain reaction doesn't need an announcement. It just needs time. U.S. Treasury yields are called risk-free. Not because they carry no risk, but because everything else is priced off them. Mortgages, corporate loans, credit cards, all anchored to that benchmark. And when Japan begins to sell, bond prices fall, yields rise, the risk-free rate moves higher. And when the foundation shifts, the entire system moves with it. The cost of money rises, not just in the United States, but everywhere. Businesses see capital become more expensive. Governments see debt become heavier. Households feel their loans quietly tighten. This is not theory. This is transmission. A crisis that begins with water in the Gulf moves through the yen in Tokyo and ends in the interest rate you pay. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because the old models no longer work. This is not an oil crisis. This is a chain reaction. Water, Gulf capital flows, Japan, U.S. Treasuries, global cost of capital. No one is immune. And those who understand this no longer ask, where is oil going? They ask, what is the yen telling us? What is Japan selling? Where is capital moving? Because the real story was never in the barrel of oil. It's in the system.